Following on from the last episode, when we successfully revived the shutter mechanism from this battery-damaged Contax camera, links as always down in the description, it's time to crack on with the next stage. The temptation would be to dive straight into the mirror box assembly, but there are a couple of slightly less exciting tasks to do first, those being the back door of the camera and also the main body. The back door needs a general clean-up and decontamination, and the alkaline soap trim needs to be removed. Something I attempted to do right at the start, but it appeared to be sandwiched between the memo holder and the back, so I'll pop the pressure plate off to see how that's fastened. Well, the pressure plate is pretty well attached on one of these, very little chance of it falling off by accident. But the memo holder is plastic welded in place, so I'll see if I can work round that. And it does appear that I can get the trim off with the memo holder in place, and also the indicator that tells you that the film is winding correctly, so that's all kind of handy. Interestingly, the film winding indicator has no connection to the roller that moves as the film is wound. I can see right through the gap. So this little ring must be a magnet, with the indicator being similar to a compass. What a neat idea. I wonder if I can test that theory. Right, a bit of filing later, and let's see what this looks like. Yep, there's definitely a magnet in there. I'll see if I can get to the roller to rotate it. The cluster of filings is a bit too big to see what's going on, so I'll move to a less densely populated area. And there you have it, a bit of magic that works the indicator. Anyway, with that little scientific experiment done, I'll get on and clean this lot up and return once I'm done. And that's all done. I won't retrim it until I do the rest of the camera, but everything's clean and the light seals are replaced. So, on to the main body of the camera. There's quite a bit to do on this, so I'll start off with the rewind post. I can release the rewind shaft by opening the retaining spring slightly. Then there are 3 screws securing the post itself. Once that's off, I can remove the door latch spring, which is secured with 2 screws. And that lot can go straight into the vinegar for decontamination. Just look at it. No, I won't say it. There's a single screw securing the flash sink socket. I'll think about how I'm going to clean this later on. And the remaining strap lug can come off. It's secured by a single screw, which appears to be stuck at the moment, so I'll do battle with that off camera and return shortly. Even the other screws that looked loose enough had already been freed up before shooting the video clip. There's very little on this camera that comes off without a fight. Although in this case you definitely don't want your strap lugs working loose. There's a couple of screws securing the door opening latch side plate, and then a couple more screws on the inner guide plate, which should free off the latch itself. But the bottom screw is corroded in place, so I'll apply some vinegar and return to this in a bit. Yep, it was all pretty corroded in there, but the latch is now finally off. I suppose I should really remove these brass runners too, if I'm going to do the job properly. There's a post over here that supported the left-hand PCBs, and the counter reset lever over to the right of the viewfinder. I'll give those both a bit of vinegar before I attempt to remove them. They can fizz away for a while until they're ready to come off. And into the vinegar they go. There's a plate to the right of the flash silicon photodiode that sits in the bottom of the mirror box. This might be an aperture lever stop or something like that, but it wants to come off whatever it is, so as always I'll give it a bit of vinegar first. I scribed the position of this plate before slackening the screws, and as I suspected, it has slotted holes, so the scribed marks will help in getting it back into its right place. There are a couple more of these plastic light seals that sit behind the shutter curtains. I'll peel these off and clean them separately. I'll need to remove the remains of this bottom PCB, so now's the time to tackle the components on the underside. I've already cleaned this area, you should have seen it beforehand. We've got battery plus and minus, with the lead that triggers the optional data back connected to the positive side, and there was a purple wire over to this contact. This wire just crumbled when I cleaned the area. There's a tantalum capacitor between negative and the middle contact, and a mystery component between plus and minus. Maybe a diode? Possibly. I can almost guarantee that it will be a pain getting this lot unsoldered, so I'll return in one moment. And there's that lot removed. The mystery component just fell apart, but that's not such a surprise as it was connected between positive and negative, and that's where the worst of the electrolysis has taken place. I've already connected a wire to one leg of the lead to assist in identification for reassembly. I'll get the rest of this connector cleaned up and have a think about what diode should go in between positive and negative for reverse polarity protection. There's not so much left to come off now. The guidepost for the bottom cover can come out. This was more solid than a solid thing when I first got the camera, but it's had about 5 weeks since I soaked it in vinegar to ease itself, and it didn't put up too much of a fight this time round. Another guidepost in the film chamber can also come out, along with the back door hinge plate too. All that's left now is the sprocket drum and its drive shaft, and the film take-up drum. I'm guessing that these are accessed from beneath this sticker in the battery compartment, so I'll soak that off using some paraffin and see what I can find underneath. Unsurprisingly, it's in a bit of a state down here, but these are the 3 screws securing the take-up drum base plate and a single screw securing the sprocket drum. I'll take that one out now, but I'll give the others a quick dip in vinegar before I attack those. I'm assuming the sprocket drum plate will just lift out, but I'll do the rest off camera because it's a little sticky at the moment. And that consists of the base plate and screw, with the sprocket drum and a large brass washer above that, and the drive shaft passing through the centre. The spring and washer are stuck solid at the moment, but they should press the 2 drive lugs up into the sprocket drum when winding the film. Then the drive shaft is pressed down against the spring to disengage the drive when rewinding the film. There's less to see with the take-up drum, just the base plate, the drum itself, and a tube in the centre to guide the film leader when inserted. So I'll get this lot cleaned up, along with the main body of the camera, and then think about reassembling this section. One camera body all cleaned, decontaminated and ready for reassembly. I'll put the initial components back in, which will just be a reversal of the disassembly process earlier in this video, so I won't bore you with that. I'm not going for a pristine look, but I will touch up the black paint in any areas that could cause unwanted reflections in the light path. There's something deeply rewarding about reassembling a project like this camera where it's been stripped to the bare bones, and it's not something that I do that often these days. I'm waiting for a suitable diode to arrive, so I've left that out for the time being. I might have had something suitable, but I figured I'd stick to a similar unit. It's a bit of a crude reverse polarity protection. If you connect the batteries the wrong way, the diode simply shorts them out. That would be something like 3 amps at 6 volts with fresh batteries. Not that they'd keep that up for long. The main body is now ready to accept the other components, but the next task is to remove the rest of the main PCB and clean up the mirror box assembly. I think this bit is complicated enough that I'll work off camera for a while, until I've got the circuit board separated from the mirror box. Ideally I'll want to strip everything off, such as this rigid PCB containing the shutter switch, so I'll be making copious notes along the way. Well, that was horrible, but it's off. There are some major potential complications with the PCB, and at this point I really don't rate my chances of fixing the camera, so I'll just ignore that for the time being and work on the other parts. Actually, I will unsolder the shutter switch board and work on that as a separate entity. Even that wasn't easy, and with the switch plate off I can already see a problem. I think the alkaline deposits have damaged the clear plastic section of the switch, so I'll take some measurements before it falls apart, in the hopes that I can recreate the part if needed. Well, I guess that's gone better than I thought it might. There are cracks in the clear plastic section, but it hasn't fallen apart yet. I'll try to beef up the screw hole so it doesn't split when I screw it back down to the chassis. The fixed contact for the shutter button is looking a bit sorry for itself. I'm not sure how much will be left when it comes out of the vinegar, but it's no use as it is, so in it goes. The question is, will there be anything left when I take it out? Yes, there will. It's not exactly like new, but it will work. I'll just get the rest of the contacts cleaned up and then I'll reassemble this section. That's worked out quite well. The shutter button switch is working, despite the best efforts of the alkaline battery leakage, as is the winding mode selector, and the power switch is fine too. I've just fitted the on-off switch contacts temporarily to test them, but the flexible PCB has to go between them and the rigid PCB beneath for the final assembly. I also cleaned the frame counter while I was at it. The alkaline hadn't contaminated this assembly too badly, so all I did was remove the counter wheel and spring, then dunked the rest in vinegar to neutralise the alkaline before washing it and oiling the pivots. So next it's on to the mirror box assembly. The insulation sheet can come off, and then I should be able to unhook the prism securing springs and ease the prism out. If it's anything like the 139, it'll take a bit of jiggling to get it out, and making a note of the light seal foam between the back of the prism and the viewfinder eyepiece. In fact, I might take the eyepiece off first and then tackle the prism. That was a little more of a struggle than on the 139. This black sealant they use round the edge of the prism carrier was rubbery on the 139, whereas it had gone very solid on this camera. I'll get the prism cleaned up and put to one side. The prism mask can now lift out. If I remember correctly, this is lightly glued on the rear upright to prevent it from moving. I'll need to be careful cleaning this because it has the shutter speed display overlay attached to it. There are some interesting challenges ahead working on the mirror box assembly. Over on the left hand side are the two adjusting screws that are used in conjunction with a sliding plate to line up the LEDs that display the shutter speeds. That's assuming that the array of LEDs still work. These came out with the main PCB. Then over on the other side are a series of lenses and a mirror to display the frame counter in the viewfinder. These again are mounted on adjuster screws, and I'm sure they'll be a laugh a minute when it comes to setting them up again. There's a LED just below that should illuminate when you're using the exposure compensation, and a set of pulleys at the front which move the aperture indicator in the viewfinder. This is a lot more fussy than the simple method of having a periscope that shows the aperture ring through the viewfinder. The numbers are on this disc here and get reflected through a series of mirrors into the top of the prism. All these little added features make working on the camera that bit more tricky, but there again, usually you wouldn't need to go near them for routine maintenance. Even removing the prism for cleaning can be done without removing the shutter speed LEDs. You just hinge the PCB out of the way, leaving the LEDs in place. So let's start stripping a few bits off. There's a single screw to remove the exposure compensation LED. The other wire fell off earlier, but I know where it goes from my notes. I'm not sure if the focusing screen carrier can come out yet, but the 4 screws will need some vinegar anyway, so I'll let them soak while I have a coffee. Right, I've got all the screws moving, but before I remove them, I'll remove and measure the shims that sit beneath the carrier to fine-tune the position of the focusing screen. I'm expecting them to all be the same, but it's easier if I check them now. All the shims were the same thickness at around 0.3 of a millimetre, but before the focusing screen carrier would come out, the frame counter periscope needed to be removed. So I'll get these two cleaned up and then I'll look and see what's next. Well, that was all a bit of a challenge. Focusing screens are very delicate and easy to damage. My plan was to remove the screen from the carrier and clean everything separately, but the 3 angled mirrors that protrude through the sides are fitted after the screen is inserted, and they're glued in place with contact adhesive. I tried to carefully cut away the adhesive and soften it with chemicals, but I can't risk getting those chemicals onto the focusing screen because they would mark it permanently. Eventually I figured the safest route was to leave everything in place and scrape off most of the corrosion by hand before giving it a wipe of vinegar to neutralise any remnants. It's all worked relatively well, so now I'll just touch up some of the bright spots so that they don't cause any unwanted reflections, and re-glue the edges of the mirrors because you can bet that having cut away most of the existing glue, one of them will now fall out. Then it'll be time to dive into what's left of the mirror box assembly, but I think that can wait until the next video. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel, not forgetting to click on the bell icon so you get notifications when a new video is released. That's it for now, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.